Sup, fam? I'm Leon, the Paperback Maniac, coming at you with the seventh and final, for reals final this time, vintage horror book review for Satanic Summer. Today, we are taking a look at The Book of the Damned by D.A. Fowler. That would be Debra Fowler. I feel like often when an author back in the day chose to go by initials in lieu of a first name, it was because she didn't want people to know she was a woman. Maybe, they worried that publishers or readers would be prejudiced against them for being a woman. Although anyone in the know can tell you that some of the most hardcore shit written in horror literature has been by women. I mean, anyone who's read Pauline Dunn or Charlie Jacob, for instance, can certainly attest to that. But anyway, this book was published by Pocket in 1993. I will begin by reading the synopsis from the back cover. How can the story be fiction when the terror is so real? Rosalind Vaughn hasn't been feeling very well. Eerie colors, smells, and sounds are making her feel dizzy and disoriented. It isn't something she ate. It isn't anything she smoked. It's something she read. Rosalind loves horror novels, but the last volume she borrowed from the library shouldn't be read late at night, or, for that matter, in broad daylight. It's called The Book of the Damned, and its readers don't simply thrill to the terrors revealed between its covers, they live them, shrieking relentless nightmares of madness, suicide, and murder. Now, Rosalind is about to join the other tortured innocents who checked out the Book of the Damned and paid for it with their immortal souls. First of all, I love how 1993 that synopsis feels. It just seems so 90s in the most charming and wonderful way. So I've got a question for you. Have you ever had anyone tell you that all this horror junk will rot your brain? Well, what if it actually did? Or have any of you ever been sucked into a book completely? Well, what if you actually were? You see, one of the reasons that we love to experience horror fiction, in my opinion, is, that's regardless of whether it's a novel, a movie, a TV show, is that it provides a fun, thrilling, and most importantly, safe and vicarious experience, right? Much like a roller coaster. And we know that, the moment we put that book down or leave the movie theater or turn off the TV, the horror and the monsters are going to be shut out and separated, right? There's a clear distinction between the make-believe and fantasy. But what if that line between make-believe and fantasy was shattered, and the terrors of the most recent horror novel that you experienced, came into your everyday world, bled into your life, making you experience it, and trapping you in a nightmare phantasmagoria of brutal, unrelenting terror that put not only you, but your closest friends and family in mortal danger. That is sort of what we have here in this book. So our main protagonist is a young woman named Rosalind Vaughn. She is a hairstylist in a beauty salon in the mall, and lately Rosalind has been out of sorts. She hasn't been feeling well at all. She's been, looking like death warmed over every day she goes into work, haggard and pale, feeling very, very enervated and exhausted, as if she's been up all night battling or running away from something in her dreams. She's also been experiencing this weird acuteness of feeling, like objects are standing out incredibly vividly in her vision. Strange smells and sounds are assailing her. And her friend Tanya, who also works in the beauty salon, is a little worried about her friend. And one day, they're eating lunch during break in the food court of the mall. And Tanya asks her, she notices her friend is not her usual spunky self, and she's worried. She says, hey, what's wrong? And Rosalind explains how she's been feeling, and Tiny says, "Do you think it could be all those horror novels that you're always reading? Could they be getting to you?" And Rosalind demurs and says, "No, no, no." She says that there's a difference between reading horror and experiencing it. Quote, "The difference between fiction and reality, vicarious and actual involvement in horror," unquote. But still, Rosalind can't deny the fact that something is up, something strange, and in particular, this weird feeling that she's been being watched. And then while she's sitting there with her friend, she looks across the mall promenade and sees this tall, burly man standing in front of a pet shop, staring at her. And then, momentarily, her vision sort of blurs out of focus, and she sees the man, but from a totally different vantage point, as if she's experiencing this from another person's point of view. And she sees him standing across a street, looking up at her, and she's in a bedroom window, and he's staring at her with binoculars and totally creeping her out. And this is very weird. So it feels like she's experiencing this through another person's reality. Suddenly she's in this bedroom looking down at the street and sees this strange man with binoculars looking up at her. She snaps out of it then, but is really unnerved because it just seemed so real. And it seemed almost like deja vu. She's not sure if this is something that maybe had happened or maybe some weird premonition of some terrible thing that was going to come. So as she's leaving work this day, and she's grateful to get home and be able to get some rest, she notices a car following her, and not just any car, but a shiny black hearse. And it keeps following her, and it freaks her out. And then she starts to become convinced that the driver of the hearse is this strange, tall man who was watching her from the mall. And she suspects that it may be a local killer at large, dubbed the Napper, who has been kidnapping young women, primarily teenagers, 15 of them so far, and they have never been heard from again. And so she's really worried. She smartly drives to the police station to tell them about this and her worries. And oddly, the police officers, first of all, don't really believe her. And then another thing, they don't have never heard of this person named the Napper who she's talking about. And this is very odd. How can the police not know of this, this murderer, kidnapper, presumably at large, who's been abducting women? And not only that, but then when she goes home to her boyfriend, he also says that he's never heard of this Napper, quote unquote, either. So no one seems to have heard of this person. And, her boyfriend suggests, why don't we go to the movies tonight? Like, you're looking really on edge. We need to kick back and have some fun. And so she agrees. And they go to the theater that night. And when she's sitting in the theater, her boyfriend goes out to get some popcorn. She feels this blowing on the nape of her neck from behind. And she hears like some stertorous breathing. She's convinced it's the Napper, again, like following her, terrorizing her. She looks back behind her. Of course, she sees no one. But she does think she's maybe going to check the parking lot, see if there's a black hearse out there. So she goes outside to check. And then when she's out in the parking lot, again, she kind of succumbs to this strange fugue state where she appears to be experiencing reality through someone else. It's not her. And she is accosted by a shadow out in the parking lot. She's attacked and she goes unconscious. And when she wakes up, she is bound with duct tape in this strange old-fashioned bedroom in this creepy house with no exits and no no windows at all. And she finds that she is, in fact, a prisoner of the Napper. She wasn't crazy. And she sees the guy finally close up, and he is this hideous monster of a man with terrible acne and scars all over his face, these big divots in which there are like spiders crawling. And he's only got like one working eyeball. The other one is like this dead white eyeball. And he unbuttons her blouse and tells her he's going to torture her until she begs him to kill her. And then when she finally does do that, he's going to kill her in the slowest and most painful way imaginable. And then he starts doing some weird stuff, some really, and this is the first of many just over-the-top outlandish scenes wherein Fowler is really having some fun. So first of all, he starts hawking up this disgusting thick, like yellow mucus into his palms, and then it starts like dribbling through his fingers viscously, and then he starts smearing this mucus over her chest and stomach for whatever reason. And then he tells her that they're going to play a little game of stick-tac-toe. And he goes and puts his fingers into his nostrils and extracts a booger-encrusted thorn, which he then proceeds to painfully and with great delight jab under her toenail as far as it goes. And then he extracts 9 more quote-unquote boogers from hell, one for each toenail in her feet. And, you know, Rosalind just, a part of her can't understand how this is happening. This is insane. One moment she was in the theater, the next moment she's been abducted by this maniacal, like, boogeyman and is in this strange house. And she's like, no, I have to be dreaming, but the pain and the sensory input she's feeling is so real, there's really no denying that this is really happening. And then more crazy stuff happens. This guy takes his penis out of his pants and it breaks off in his hand. And then he flicks the penis like a lighter. And then he starts burning her all over her body with his penis. And he quips, "Don't you like hot sex?" in one of many Freddy Krueger-esque one-liners. And then, spiders and insects are falling out of the grooves and trenches of his face onto her body. Total craziness continues to happen. Luckily, she discovers a knife under the bed. She grabs the knife and swings it at him, stabs him. And although he appears to be amused by this, he does then fall down dead. And Rosalind, rather than follow her instinct, which would be to get the hell out of there immediately, she feels this strange compulsion to gather the 10 thorns that the guy had pulled out of his nose to torture her with, and she starts pressing them all into his face. But it's almost as if something else is dictating her actions. It's almost like she's not in control, like she's following the script of some predetermined story almost. And then after this happens, she starts running through the maze-like hallways of this house, trying to escape, wondering if maybe this is what kind of reality has she entered here? And then finally, she wakes up back in the theater, and she's frantic, of course, and she tries to tell her boyfriend what had happened, that she had, stepped outside and been abducted by the napper, this maniac, and tortured in this dark, creepy house. And of course, her boyfriend, Tyler, we then kind of jarringly go into his point of view for a moment, and he's just thinking man, I thought I had the right, I thought I found the right girl, I thought I found the perfect girl, but this bitch is crazy, right? He's thinking what's wrong with this woman? What is she talking about? Then, slowly, Rosalind starts to put all the pieces together. All of these freaky incidents that have been happening appear to have been scenes from the last horror novel that she checked out from the library, a book called The Book of the Dead. Or The Book of the Damned, sorry. And in that book, the bad guy had been the devil himself, but disguised as this leering, hearse-driving, psychotic boogeyman named Levi D. Santa. And if you think about that name, there may be a couple of anagrams there. And he's the napper who's been kidnapping teenagers, taking them back to this creepy house and torturing them and killing them there. And she is convinced that somehow she is experiencing events in that book, and she's somehow living inside the story of that book. And yeah, and so, and by the way, this Santa character is just pure Freddy Krueger nightmare fuel. At one point, his tongue begins to grow and slithers all over her face like a tapeworm, and then it makes its way into her mouth, oozing down her throat, and then tunneling into her intestines, where it releases this ulcer-creating substance. I'm actually going to read you guys a short quote. This is that scene where his tongue slithers down her throat. It said, Caroline gagged violently, but the tongue kept going in, going deeper, past her tonsils, past her larynx, and still deeper. The taste of salty, rancid meat filled her mouth as the horror of the experience filled her mind. She felt the tongue oozing its way past her throat, going down into her intestines, where it released an extremely acidic, ulcer-creating substance. She thought of biting down on it, but feared the consequences of such an action, even more than what was happening. After depositing its foul venom, Santa's tongue slowly began to withdraw. When it at last left her mouth, Caroline began to retch, but nothing would come up. So, just to give you guys an idea. So, the question here is, has Rosalind damned herself by reading this infernal book? She remembers that there had been a library checkout card in her copy of the book that she was using as a bookmark, which had said the previous person who had checked out the book's name. And she decides that she's going to try to find this person to find out if what is happening to her happened to that person, right? And maybe try to get to the bottom of this. And she decides to seek this person out, and she does a little research, finds out that this person has been admitted into a state mental institution for murdering his sister after being acquitted of murder on terms of insanity. And that doesn't really bode well, right? But she resolves that she's going to go to the state hospital and maybe talk with this person and find out, try to figure out what's going on and what might happen to her ultimately. So Rosalind and her friend Tanya, they go to the state sanitarium to visit the last person who checked out the book, who had killed his sister, evidently. And it's not very assuring at all when they find out that this guy is in the maximum security quadrant of the hospital, and that he's very much still haunted by the book and frequently lapses into the book, thinking he's characters in the book, thinking he might be the victim, and oftentimes thinking he is Santa himself. So it's not just, it's not just one character when you go into this book. You can be the killer, and that can be problematic, right? You can be killing people you definitely do not want to harm. So then the question becomes, could Satan himself be using this book to possess people to do, horrific deeds? Could it be that if you read the book, you become damned and are possessed by this storybook villain, Santa, Levi D. Santa, and, inflict harm on those that you love? So at one point, Rosalind does actually sort of become possessed of the book and does kill someone that she, definitely did not want to kill. And now she is on the run from the police. Her friend Tanya says, don't go to the police just yet. Let's look for the author of this book. Maybe we can figure out what's happening if we track down the writer. And it's not going to be easy, right? Because now the police are on her tail, and what else? She's constantly still succumbing to these hallucinations and these nightmare, scenarios, and she's at risk, right, of doing things herself, when she's kind of feeling like the book is taking over her life. And all the meanwhile, the copy of the book is still being checked out from the library and is in circulation among a bunch of teenagers. So there's always some fresh new horror in the offing, right? Because because it turns out that whoever has this book and reads it, this one library copy, does succumb to its terrors. So, yes. I will say, being a fan of such, just those fun, trashy horror novels, this book is a real treat. It's really a celebration of the types of books that I review on this channel. Miss Fowler really seemed to love that, this type of horror too, and her love for wild and unrelenting supernatural horror really shines here. I have always been a fan of horror that sort of blurs the line between reality and fantasy. So, books where characters succumb to hallucinations and nightmare dream logic. Some of my favorite books that I've reviewed on this channel so far have been like that, like Douglas Borton's Dream House, R. Patrick Gates's Grim Memorials, and even Debra Fowler's own What's Wrong with Valerie? And here she really delivers the goods with that. We get long, extended horror set pieces here, and it seems like where another writer would kind of wrap it up and bring things back to reality, Miss Fowler really seemed to sort of revel in ratcheting up the supernatural horror and the craziness of the scenes, and they just keep getting kind of more surreal and freaky as the book goes. I really loved the character of Levi DeSanta. Such a great evil character. Has a little goofiness to him. You got to remember this book was written in the early 90s when commercial horror had gotten quite goofy, and almost every like horror icon of the time was spitting one-liners before he killed someone. And you definitely get that here. This character very much in particular inspired by Freddy Krueger, as I had mentioned. I mean, he even like calls Rosalind bitch all the time. He says, "Time for the real party, bitch." At one point, so Freddy. At one point he like plucks out a corpse's eyeball and offers it to Rosalind. Says, "Care for a mint?" And then when she tells him to eat it yourself and choke on it, he shrugs and says, "Okay, suit yourself." And he like throws it up in the air and lets it land on his tongue and like kind of greedily gulps it down. And then his head starts swelling up to like the size of a basketball. His one eye pops out, and he starts like gagging and choking. And she realizes he's just obliging her wish of choking. And it's just silly, silliness, but very fun. The writing, as usual, with Fowler is great. Just vivid, crisp. Imagery conveys a lot with just the right amount of words. Like What's Wrong with Valerie, this book really likes to play with the idea of is this supernatural or is this psychosis? In this case, induced psychosis. Because it soon becomes possible, there is a possibility that if it's not really a book of the damned, there could be a non-supernatural explanation. It could be that the author of this book made just one copy, produced it himself, and did it as a way of getting revenge on a particular person. But now that the book's out in circulation, it's causing, this craziness for anyone who reads it. So you don't know if it's supernatural or not, just like with What's Wrong with Valerie. And like that former novel, this one concerns a seemingly ordinary woman at the mercy of forces beyond her control, which cause her to hallucinate and do horrible things. Fowler really seemed interested in that idea of like a female protagonist succumbing to evil ideations of the mind, and and then doing like horrible atrocities, committing horrible crimes. But whereas What's Wrong with Valerie was more psychological, this one really leans into just like the pure pulpy sensationalistic trashiness of it, and Fowler really seems to be having fun here. I mean, we get some like just delightfully gross out scenes. We get slug-like tongues burrowing into people's flesh. We get rotting, reanimated corpses. We get big scorpions with demonic faces, tarantula attacks, characters getting spun in webs, and then being digested by big devil-faced spiders, and then being shat out of them. We get teens getting tortured, little kids getting killed, and then, even crazier shit than that in the final third of the book. We get multiple references to McDonald's, so you may be craving a Big Mac as you read this. Just an utter blast. If I had to, make a criticism, I would say that toward the end of the book, it spends a little too much time following some detectives. The detectives that, were trying to track down the protagonist, they start to then realize they need to find the author. And then it spends a little too much time, I feel like, in their investigation. And I think that always slows a horror novel down when you get into the procedural aspect. It's not too bad, but I thought it did affect the pace just a little bit. But otherwise, just a great read. Definitely a strong 4 out of 5. Like Miss Fowler's other works, there's some great, dark, twisted humor in this book as well. So yeah, if you like that kind of thing, if you like weird, trippy, supernatural horror with gross elements, definitely check it out. It gets my recommendation. So that, guys, is The Book of the Damned by Debra Fowler. Hope you enjoyed the review. If you've read that book, or if you're a fan of Fowler's, as I am, definitely drop a line and, give a suggestion of what to read next. I think she's got kind of a Halloween set book, and I might return to her very soon in October for that one. So The Devil's End, I think that one's called. So I'm very eager to get back to Fowler soon. Because so far she's 2 for 2. She's definitely impressed me with everything that I've read. So anyway, that's the review. Hope you enjoyed it, guys. Until next time, take it easy. I'll see you later. Peace.